The AI revolution is moving from bits to atoms. As these models scale, investors are becoming all too aware of a hard reality that all this digital intelligence will need a massive amount of power. This surge has created a perfect storm for the energy sector where AI demand, an aging grid, and the global push for clean energy are all colliding at once, not creating just a trend, but an energy super cycle. From Bitcoin miners pivoting into AI power providers to nuclear energy making a historic comeback, the race to modernize our infrastructure is moving faster than anyone predicted. So, who are the players emerging as the true leaders in this transition? What are the key themes investors need to watch in 2026? Here with me to help break down energy themes and trends for 2026 is IBD business reporter Kit Norton. Now, Kit, we've got a lot of ground to cover. The energy sector, for a long time, I think was considered the slow and steady corner of the market, but with AI, that has all shifted. So, what were the big themes in 2025 that you see extending into 2026?
Sure. So I think first, as you said, looking specifically at the utilities space, definitely pretty slow and steady, pretty consistent over time. And now I think even it's better just to kind of start towards the end of 2024 in terms of kind of giving context for what we've seen in 2025 and then what to kind of expect in 2026. Obviously, in 2024 is when OpenAI really came to the fore. There was so much excitement around AI, and then for utilities, the grid, electricity generation, the data centers needed for that AI, and that's where you see, for instance, on the S&P 500 with Constellation Energy and Vistra, which we'll discuss more later. These very significant gains in 2024. So I think it's very important to kind of look at how this narrative began in 2024 and has continued through 2025, mostly driven by the AI stock market, which, of course, as all investors know well, is what is driving the market currently. So I think that's very important first to note. And then also what happened in 2025 is the Trump administration and how this convergence with big tech really came together in support of AI build out with data centers, and a focus on modernizing the grid in order to keep up in the AI arms race overall with China. So I think that's kind of at the macro level, kind of what's been going on in 2025. And as of now, that's expected to continue in 2026. Obviously, the Trump administration appears to be continue to be focused on making sure that the U.S. continues to be a leader in AI, and for that, you need a lot of this energy for the data centers, and big tech has been a big driving part in lockstep with the administration on this front.
No, and as you mentioned, to be the AI leader, it's all about that data center demand, and that's going to require a lot of power. I think totals for new data centers right now account for about 4% of total electricity demand. That share is expected to triple to 12% by the end of the decade, which is just in a few years, really. So, what companies do you see benefiting from the surge in demand?
Exactly. I mean, this is the big issue at hand. And I believe Morgan Stanley recently estimated that there's about a 47 gigawatt shortfall potential in the U.S. power grid over the next several years as demand for data centers picks up. So this is really, the main narrative overall for a lot of these companies. And the big ones appear to be Constellation Energy and Vistra, both S&P 500 components, and both of them have existing nuclear power capabilities, which is a big pro for them, as nuclear power has gotten a bit of a resurgence, and kind of the classic term is renaissance now in the last 2 years or so, on primarily big tech bets that nuclear energy will be the long-term solution to stable energy from the grid or from co-locating, putting a data center right next to a nuclear power plant for the massive amounts of energy needed for AI data centers. However, there's also, and it seems a bit like this um, uh, analysis has taken off more recently, the acknowledgement that natural gas is the more likely, at least in the short term, however, maybe longer, solution that is going to play in for getting those data centers online and getting the energy that they need at much quicker timelines. And so, if we're looking at those companies, one, you have kind of the natural gas producers, which would be like Devon Energy, uh, and then also in terms of the super majors, Exxon and Chevron are also big players in natural gas space. However, there's also the main crux of this, which is the gas turbines needed for power generation. And there you're primarily looking at GE Vernova and Siemens Energy. These are the two massive producers of gas turbines. And as we've seen this year, this has been a major part of the analysis and narrative around these companies is that backlog for gas turbines. So I would say in terms of two other major companies to look at, GE Vernova and Siemens Energy are ones to watch.
And that deals with power generation. But are there any specific, I guess we could call them picks and shovels, like electrical equipment, cooling systems, transformers, any of those companies that are perhaps maybe being overlooked right now by retail investors?
Yeah, I mean, this is another thing with the AI data centers. I mean, it's not so much well, one could look at it in terms of a power generation story and narrative. Others could look at it as a cooling thesis because there's so much heat coming off from this power generation. You need the equipment to be able to cool that. So if you're looking at HVAC and cooling plays, Comfort Systems is one which has been looked at a bit as a AI adjacent play for again throughout 2025. Modine Manufacturing is another one specifically on the kind of HVAC and cooling space. However, it should be noted, and this is a bit interesting, that the 14 stocks in the IBD tracked AC and heating industry group are all about, I believe, about 1% up only for 2025, which is very interesting considering the AI narrative and the AI market this year. So those are two definitely to keep track of on the HVAC side. I would say in terms of looking at other ones for the grid specifically, as I was just talking about GE Vernova and Siemens Energy for gas turbines, they're also major producers of transformers and grid technology. And they also have exposure to nuclear as well. So these companies actually are very diversified when it comes to the AI energy play that investors may want to look at.
Let's go ahead and dive into nuclear, which, as you mentioned, that sector has been having sort of a renaissance here as it becomes one of the favored solutions for this AI power problem. The VanEck uranium and nuclear ETF saw gains of 50% in 2025. So, what have been the standouts in this sector, and do you expect that strength to continue?
So to answer that question, I would say there's there's two groups. There's one group of nuclear, which is much more the speculative companies. And those ones tend to be more focused on a bit of the emerging tech, which are kind of now known as the small modular reactor or SMRs. And that's a separate group of companies than the ones, for instance, as I was mentioning, Constellation, Vistra. There's also Talon Energy, which have nuclear power plants, kind of the traditional type that you would think of when you think about nuclear energy. So there are two very distinct um, pockets there. So when we're looking at Constellation, Vistra, they had massive gains in terms of share price in 2024, and they have continued solid moves upward in 2025, but below the 2024 advances. Now, their narrative is very much tied to deals with big tech. Uh, Both of those companies and Talon Energy have already inked some pretty significant deals with the top hyperscalers in the U.S., which has really kind of drawn that share price upward. But for 2026, there's a question whether, okay, how many deals are actually out there? Is there a limit? And because these deals are very long term, in terms of looking at the profit and revenue, when will this actually come about? So I would say there's a bit of a push and pull when it comes to that thesis on those companies for 2026. When you're looking at the SMRs, the kind of emerging advanced nuclear technology companies, that's where you've seen really big gains in 2025. Specifically, you have Oklo, which was has been backed by Sam Altman. However, he's no longer on the board of that company. But that is one that has really seen a very dramatic spike in share price in 2025. However, it's very important to know with Oklo, NuScale, and Nano Nuclear, which are the primary three SMR companies, they're not expected to bring their commercially viable small reactors online until later this decade or early 2030. So that's very important to know. These are all companies that are not turning a profit as of yet. So these are much more speculative plays. However, share price overall, they've been very strong this year. However, they have come down significantly since all hitting highs in October, which kind of coincided with a bit of the AI bubble concerns. Um, so this one, it's kind of tricky to forecast what exactly is going to happen in 2026. However, it seems probable that they will continue to perform strongly. Whether they perform to kind of the double digit or triple digit gains they've had this year remains to be seen.
So, Kate, you talked a lot about the nuclear power generator and some of these more speculative plays with the small modular reactors. But what about uranium miners? How has that sector been performing, and what can we expect in the coming year?
So uranium has become a bit of a focal point in this whole overarching story this year around the nuclear renaissance and the potential need from AI. So this has kind of been a strong narrative underneath several of these companies, and then also what you have is the Trump administration's efforts to increase domestic production of uranium. And what's happened here is that several uranium mining operations, which historically investors weren't really paying a whole lot of attention to, have really come to the fore again in this kind of AI adjacent critical minerals space that has really taken off here in the last year. So I think it's important to note one of the big ones, which is actually Canadian based. Cameco is one that both is a major uranium producer in North America and across the world, but a big player in the US, both on the policy side and then also in terms of the market, are very positive for them. And they also have a major ownership stake in Westinghouse, which is a top nuclear reactor provider, which the Trump administration has in fact tapped for a big build out of new nuclear power plants across the country. So this is one that's very important to keep an eye on throughout 2026. Some of the other ones, you have uranium miner Centrus Energy, you have kind of nuclear fuel plays, uranium energy, Lightbridge Energy, and Energy Fuels, and all these companies are really kind of the bedrock for the nuclear renaissance and nuclear narrative moving forward, if in fact it comes about. These companies are really what's going to drive that when you're talking about the fuel needed for the nuclear power plants that could potentially come online for the data centers. Without the uranium, it's very unlikely that this narrative can happen.
No, that's really interesting. And, when we're talking about nuclear powering AI, there's also Bitcoin miners in play. A lot of these companies are pivoting to AI data center power providers. So, who are the leaders here, and what do you expect to see in the coming year?
First, I'd like to mention that, kind of pre AI data centers, the Bitcoin mining was really seen as, was already seen as a major drain on power grids. This is well before 2024, 2025, and the AI data center craze. So I think that's also very important to keep in mind when discussing the Bitcoin mining space. In terms of leaders, it seems pretty clear right now that uh, those companies would be IREN, Cipher Mining, Core Scientific, TeraWolf, Bit Digital, just to name a few. And when analysts are discussing these, though, it's very important that they're mentioning that these companies and Bitcoin mining operations are not necessarily kind of trend chasing. They're more looking in terms of, okay, how can we work and how can we create synergies with the data center infrastructure and energy requirements, and looking at it in terms of whether it makes sense for kind of to diversify revenue streams and go into those areas. But then, of course, on the flip side, that takes a lot of capital, and so some of the a risk could be for some of the smaller Bitcoin mining companies that financially they could be less stable if they choose to go into that space. So it's a bit of a tightrope these companies are walking.
And in terms of the puzzle here with power solution, battery storage is also seen as a key technology when it comes to the AI power equation. Now, beyond just your standard lithium batteries, are there any emerging technologies or specific companies that you think could be ready for prime time in 2026?
So on this front, as you said, besides lithium batteries, but the big one is Tesla for this. And this has been something that uh, uh, CEO Elon Musk and the company have been really focusing on. So that's probably the biggest and not so much emerging company or technology, but that's the one that seems to be well situated to capitalize on continued um, AI data center energy needs and being able to store energy for those facilities. Looking elsewhere, there's been some discussion around Solaris Energy Infrastructure, which is a company that has been primarily a bit of a oil and gas services play, but as recently, I think it was towards the 24, made a purchase of a company in order to get into more power generation solutions. And they're really looking to delve more into the AI data center marketplace, specifically in 2025, to kind of meet this need for on-site generation and storage. And that primarily, though, is on the gas turbine side, which again seems to be where more companies are looking now in the short term, and and possibly also in the long term, just because of the ability to bring energy online, to take it offline, and have a lot more flexibility when it comes to natural gas. So that's one certainly also to keep an eye on in 2026 and moving forward towards the end of the decade.
Now, and speaking of bringing energy online, when it comes to the grid, there's a massive backlog of these power projects waiting to be connected. So, are there any specific companies or sectors to watch that you think will benefit from the billions that are being spent on these transmission upgrades?
So I, I, I don't want to sound too much like a broken record. However, it would be, this is going to continue to be a tailwind for GE Vernova, Siemens Energy, but I think also more broadly, one can look at all of this backlog of projects and all the deals that have been announced. This is a key element to the overall market health right now in 2025, and that's probably not going to dissipate in 2026 unless an AI bubble bursts. However, the support from the Trump administration and big tech really putting a lot of their money behind it, it makes it so that this is a very wide-reaching aspect of the current U.S. economy and the market as a whole. So it may be a bit of a cop out, but I would say the amount of companies that are going to potentially uh, capitalize on all of these projects is very widespread.
Well, Kit, we like to joke that everything seems to be an AI play right now, but it really kind of is. And, stepping back a little bit, what is the biggest black swan risk for energy in 2026? Is it a shift in government subsidies, a slowdown in spending, or something else?
One issue to keep an eye on is natural gas prices. Um, if there is a big natural disaster that takes place that pushes natural gas prices way up, that would certainly be a big risk to a lot of these projects and to energy generation overall. And then I would also say any change in um, government policy and the Trump administration's policy in 2026 could also have a significant impact. Whether that happens or not, it remains to be seen. But certainly, uh, natural gas prices, as again as I've said, that this really seems to be the key energy source that will be used now, at least in the next coming years, for a lot of this build out. It's very possible that geopolitical um, uh, events may also play its role going on here. Um, uh, Trump's ongoing tariff policies in terms of, I mean, this is a bit of an aside, but even looking at the coal sector, which has actually performed pretty well this year in the face of Trump's tariffs, and seeing as how much coal we export to China, it's just there's interesting dynamics here going on at the federal level, which are, in terms of investors, it's a bit hard to one predict, but it's certainly something to be keeping an eye on here in 2026.
Well, Kit, thank you so much for your insights today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.